Thank you everyone for joining today. Welcome to today's session of the Annual Forum 2026 of the Scaling Community of Practice. We have some very exciting discussions ahead of us with a distinguished panel of speakers. But let me start by a quick introduction. I am Rachna Nag Chaudhary, co-chair of the working group M&E for Scaling, along with John Floretta as well as Aparna Krishnan, who are both on this call with me. I will be the moderator for you today. Before we begin with the main topic of today's session, let me give you a little bit of a background. The Scaling Community of Practice, or the SCOP, is now in its 11th year. It's grown significantly with just 50 members that we started with to now 5,000 members. So if you're not a member yet, please do sign up. Everyone is free to join. We are a network of development and climate practitioners who are committed to contributing to the scale agenda, which is to help achieve sustainable impact that matches the scale of the problem. We have 9 working groups, including this one, which is the M&E working group. And we regularly publish reports, knowledge products, as well as learning exchanges like this one. And we host an annual forum for scaling exchange of knowledge and promoting action. This year's 2-week forum marks a significant milestone for our community as we're launching the 2026-2030 call for action for a scaling campaign. So please join as many sessions as you can. There is a chat function as well where you can share where you're joining in from today and any reflections or questions that you have. We will have a Q&A section in the end, so please do feel free to ask any questions. The session is also being recorded, so if any of your colleagues couldn't join today, please do send the recording their way. So let's now turn to today's session. This M&E working group has hosted many such webinars and discussions and produced knowledge products to explore the topic of what works in scaling innovations, particularly through the public sector to deliver high impact social programs, and the need for an M&E infrastructure at scale. In the past, we've had insights from civil society on how to really bring learnings from the outside to the government for successful scale up and what kind of infrastructure and scaling M&E that needs to happen for this outside in approach. But over the last year or so, we've been talking and really reflecting more and more about what it takes for governments to innovate within the systems at scale, and learning and evaluation can really be embedded and institutionalized. So within this theme, one topic that we discussed in the last webinar was around embedded evaluation and learning labs. And we heard from experiences from Peru, Rwanda, as well as other donors. And so today we have a panel of individuals that are really actioning this model in Morocco. Morocco's education ministry has a unique model where an entire education reform is in partnership with an evaluation and learning lab. The university, Mohammed VI Polytechnic, is partnering with JPAL at MIT, as well as the Harvard Center for International Development to establish the Morocco Innovation and Evaluation Lab. So we have a panel with us today. We have with us 3 colleagues who work on this monitoring and Morocco Innovation and Evaluation Lab. Our first speaker is Andreas de Barros, Andy, who is an assistant professor in the School of Education at the University of California, Irvine. Andy's research specializes in program evaluation and evidence-based education policy in the Global South. And Andy is a key research partner at the Moroccan Evaluation and Learning Lab and is leading evaluations with the government of Morocco on the education reforms. We also have with us Iman Fahali, who is a senior public policy advisor. She works at the intersection of strategy, implementation, and impact, supporting complex reforms in the fields of education, employment, and economic development. Iman has been instrumental and worked on this reform as an advisor to the government from the inception and has deep understanding of research and policy landscape. Finally, last but not the least, we have with us Ghali Fikri, who is an advisor and member of the Reform Unit at the Moroccan Ministry of Education. He's in charge of the Pioneer School program that we will talk a lot about today. And Ghali in the past has worked with governments, public agencies, international organizations, philanthropic foundations on issues relating to social and economic development. Ghali brings to our discussion a perspective on how reforms are implemented within the public sector and how evidence can be embedded. So, without further ado, let me get right into this. For the audience here, we will spend the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes on a deep dive into this research partnership and within the Moroccan Ministry of Education. And then we will have 10 minutes or so for a Q&A with the audience as well. So for the panel discussion, let me first start with Iman. The Moroccan government, if you go back to 2022, launched a very ambitious set of school reform roadmaps. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that the government was facing and what really prompted the thinking behind these education reforms, and help sort of paint a bit of a picture for the audience on some of the backdrop to the education reforms as it is today? I also wanted to highlight that it's interesting that the reform itself drew a lot from existing evidence as well, which is, I think, quite fascinating for a government to do anyway. And so I wanted to turn to you to tell us a bit about the motivation behind the education reforms.
Hi, Rashna. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it actually feels a little bit like coming back home, since I was part of the family of the JPAL family a few years ago, and it's nice to have this conversation today with this ecosystem that I learned so much from. So you asked me about the motivation for the reform, and to be honest, we knew we had a serious problem in education even before COVID. Several national, international reports were already showing that learning levels were very, very low. And then COVID came and it made everything much worse. So when the team came in at the beginning of the government mandate, we said that we first need to stop and to understand the real situation in very concrete terms. So all this started with very simple student assessments to see where children actually were in their learning. And the results were actually quite shocking because less than 20% of students were mastering foundational skills in reading, in French and in Arabic and in math, which are the main subjects we teach in primary school. So we knew it was bad, but we didn't think it was this bad. So when you face a situation like this, you cannot respond with the small programs or isolated experiments here and there, but you really need something that is holistic and that is systemic and integrated. And that's how the Pioneer Schools program emerged. And it actually required real political courage and strong leadership, because it was not a small reform. And most importantly, we didn't want to wait 5 years to, structure a program, bring in all the experts and really, take our time in doing this. We really needed to do something very quickly. It was really urgent. So we had to move fast, and we really had to disrupt. So the backing of the leadership at the time was absolutely crucial. And in the beginning, we started with 600 schools, which isn't a small number for a pilot. And that sample was selected based on readiness and also based on volunteer engagements, because we wanted to create a new dynamic. We needed early success stories to rebuild trust in education reform among all the stakeholders, teachers, families, the Ministry of Finance. Everyone has been hearing about the many education reforms over the years, which were not necessarily as successful in improving learning. So we really needed this to be a good start of the reform. And basically, the 3 years later, the core model still remains the same. So just to give you an overview of what is the Pioneer Schools program, basically before the school year even starts, there is major preparation. There is rehabilitation of schools, equipment of schools with video projectors, with several other equipments. Teachers get laptops, etc. And there's also extensive training of inspectors, of teachers. So everything has to be ready before we even start the school year. And then the school year starts with a diagnostic assessment based on the other test. And students are grouped based on their level within their grade. Then they go through 6 weeks of intensive remediation program. And then we assess them again, and they enter into the system where they're going to learn new things. But those that are still lagging behind also get access to an additional remediation program throughout the year. And so during the year, we move into more structured and structured pedagogy and explicit teaching with scripted lessons and specific progression of the teaching with consolidation sessions, etc., to make sure that the kids are not just going through the program, but they are actually learning before moving to new materials. We also introduced a strong formative assessment system, and also we make sure that the grades are monitored and verified to ensure that they are reliable and that we can use them for decision making. So, and then finally, there's also a certification and labeling systems for schools based on strict quality standards. So they have to go through go through a whole certificate. Teachers, inspectors, other stakeholders have to go through a certification process to be able to get certain financial incentives that go with this program. So as you can see, it's not like one single program, it's a fully integrated reform. And I think this is what explains the results you've probably seen in the research that was conducted by the JPAL affiliates research team that is represented by Andy today. And the impact after that first year was really massive. We are talking here about an effect size of 0.9 standard deviations, which is huge compared with most indication interventions anywhere in the world. And I think that's because of the fact that it was a really integrated program, and it's beyond what many different isolated programs can produce. Yeah, so I know you asked me another question about the fact that the reform was based on evidence and recommendations from different education networks, and actually, yeah, evidence was from the beginning a non-negotiable pillar of this roadmap. And again, I credit the leadership at the time for making sure it was the case. So the idea is that before we worked on any major components of this program, we always started with a literature review, consulted experts, but then we created a national technical team that pilots and adapts the approach. So, for example, for the remediation pillar, we were in touch with Pratham. We invited them here for several days of training to really understand the philosophy behind the program. And then our team of inspectors adapted it to our context, whether in terms of format. So we integrated an intensive remediation period at the beginning of the year. And I believe this format was quite an innovative one. I hadn't seen it in other countries that adapted the TARL program. We also adapted the content, especially, for example, for French, where we needed consolidation of the materials. And even lately, we even integrated scripted lessons into the program. So every time we build strong feedback loops, and we test and adjust and improve based on scientific evidence.
Thanks, Iman. And I think, and in 3 minutes, you tried to capture really the entirety of the very sort of, as you said, holistic education reform, which I think is yeah, it's quite a handful. I wanted to move to you, Gali, to talk, maybe give your sense of some of the motivation as well as you understand it, but also specifically talk about how the expansion of this reform works. So, right, initially we had 600 schools, but my understanding now is that from this first year onward, we've also had more lower secondary schools added. And in fact, the reform has expanded further in its scope in terms of having a more systemic and holistic approach. So can you talk a bit about what prompted that?
Sure. Thank you, Rachna, and hi everyone. So in a way, the middle school program having been initiated perhaps a year later than the primary school program, it was a very strong basis to initiating the thinking of what should be done on the learning aspect of things. However, in middle schools, of course, there is a learning crisis, one that is, evidenced by international assessments. According to PISA, over 70% of Moroccan students aged 15 do not master, expected competencies in reading, comprehension, maths, and science. And so that in itself is, a major crisis. And I think as much as in middle schools, that kind of information was always there, we were always surprised that actually the success rates at the end of primary schools were actually quite high. So what the pioneer schools at the primary level actually did and instilled at the ministry is first and foremost this culture of facing the reality of learning and how critical the condition of our students was, not only in middle schools but actually in primary schools. And so there is a learning crisis, one that has been accumulating for years in primary and that we kind of discover in middle schools. And that is one factor leading to dropouts. And so dropouts is one of the major challenges that we have in middle schools with, depending on the year, almost 150,000 students leaving middle schools before finishing the 3 years of mandatory middle school program. And so the starting point was there. How do we address dropouts, knowing that one of the major reasons of dropouts is challenges in learning that have accumulated throughout the years. So in a way, at the beginning, it was a little bit frustrating to think that in middle schools we're limited in terms of leverage because we receive students that have been accumulating so many learning challenges that there's very little to do. But we had to, think kind of innovatively on what needs to be done. So to address dropouts, you need to improve learning. You need to make the school attractive and attractive to this category of students who are no longer kids but who are teenagers. Being a teenager means not only that you have expectations of what you like and you do not like, but it also means that you have many things going across through your body and your mind, the importance of of your social network at school, etc. And so I think what makes the middle school program and the reform at the middle school level challenging and innovative is that to address dropouts, it had to work across different factors that lead to dropout: learning, social and emotional feeling of students at school, and well-being and skills development. And so that was the basis of what needed to be done in middle schools. For learning, what we did, even though the results of the primary schools were still not out, I think we were all quite convinced that we were going in the right direction, because from the beginning, as Iman said, the choices that were made were based on evidence. So we knew that we had to have a remediation period at the beginning of the year, and that we needed to implement direct and structured learning throughout the year. And so that we did. However, it required a lot of adaptation for the new topics that are studied in middle schools that are not studied in primary schools, to adapt also for the language of learning that changes for science topics from primary to middle. So we leverage what was done in the primary school program for the learning outcomes and adapted it. But we still had to make the school attractive and make students feel kind of welcome and at home at school. And to do that, there needed to be something else than just what is given in the classroom. So one major thing and one major innovation that was put in place is to put in place a weekly 2-hour extracurricular activity program for all students. And so they can do theater, programming, or sports, and that's mandatory. And it is managed by either their own teachers or teachers from the school that they do not know. And that was a major kind of contributor to making the school more attractive, because the students choose the extracurricular activities that they participate to. And also it creates a different kind of link and relationship between the students and the teacher society. So that's our second pillar, extracurricular activities to make the school more attractive. And create a stronger link and connection between students and the school. And the third pillar for us is how can we detect and support those students who are most at risk of dropping out. So here again, data was very important. We started by understanding both quantitatively and quantitatively what were the factors and drivers of dropouts, what are the characteristics of students dropping out. And based on that, we built an early warning system that every school has, so that they know very early on in the school year who are the students who are at risk of dropping out. And around this early warning system, that's an information system, we built a governance model that relies quite heavily on the leadership of the headmaster. So the headmaster, along with a group of teachers and social workers embedded within the school, meets regularly to discuss the specific situations of these at-risk students and develop kind of plans to support them throughout the year. And the support is multidimensional. It can be parents mobilization, it can be extracurricular tutoring, it can be social and emotional support. And what's I think in my opinion, what makes the strength of the model is the interconnection of all these components. that learning will prevent dropouts, extracurricular will prevent dropouts. This school units helps direct headmaster and teacher actions to prevent dropouts.
Thank you so
I'll
much
stop
for those
here. I
reflections.
think I've given way too many details.
No, this is very, very relevant, and I think paints a very clear picture of both kind of the motivation behind this, but also really the government's approach of seeing this holistically as not just a one-point solution, but both that middle school outcomes are path dependent, of course, with the primary. So I quite liked what you said about that this was really a prompt to face some of the realities of what was actually happening in the school systems, but also the fact that with middle school interventions, there is a lot more layering in terms of other aspects that sort of appeal to a different age group. Given that, you mentioned that this piece around evidence was really at the base of a lot of this discussion, let's move on a little bit to thinking about the collaboration and how this fits into, again, a rather kind of holistic education reform, which was grounded in evidence, but also had a commitment towards learning. So I'll pose this question to both Iman and Andy to give me maybe different perspectives on this. Iman, I understand that you were there to kind of set this up and systematically think about evaluations. And Andy, perhaps from your perspective, it would be really great to see what is it in terms of exciting about it from a researcher perspective here, and in this kind of a collaboration and partnership. We can start with you, Iman, and then move on to Andy. Let's do that.
Sure. So when all of this started, I was still at JPAL at the time, but I was also in touch with the minister and some cabinet members from previous work engagements. And the thing is, when we started talking about collaborating on this, they were very clear that they didn't just want an evaluation. They actually wanted someone to help them think through the M&E system as part of the reform itself. So it became really quickly to us at the time that it was not going to be like a classic consultant or expert type of role, because it wasn't about coming in, designing an evaluation, implementing it, and then leaving. It was like they really wanted a strong M&E component, and for it to be real and not to be superficial. Then their ask was that we had to build this reform with them. So as a JPAL staff at the time, the scope of work was quite blurry, and we didn't have a contract in place yet, but we still decided to pursue this opportunity. And I had the freedom from leadership to do so, which was really a game changer in building this partnership, because I spent a lot of time with the ministry teams, sitting in meetings, in operational discussions that had nothing to do with the evaluation itself. But that really helped me understand the constraints and co-design solutions with them based on evidence. And so I think that was really key to building this partnership, because I wasn't seen as an external advisor. I was basically part of the team from the beginning. And for me, that's a big lesson in how you push evidence into reform agendas. You really have to embed senior team members at the highest level of decision making, not just at the operational level or at the programmatic level. And you really have to be willing to spend extensive time engaging with the teams and with the content beyond the evaluation to really get the trust and for this to really be an important piece of the reform. Now, in terms of challenges, there were many of them. First, finding the right research team. We needed researchers who had the expertise, but who were also willing to go beyond their specific academic interests, and really engage in a true long-term partnership, which means flexibility, which means alignment with government timelines. And yeah, just generally a willingness to work on, important questions for the policymakers here, and not just like publishable stuff. And then second, maybe another challenge is that the ministry had very limited M&E teams. So we basically really had to build everything from scratch, assessment tools, processes, everything. And that was a lot of work. And then maybe one last thing that is quite challenging is the pace, because the reform, the ministry was moving very, very fast. And they were using data to, like, in real time to improve the program. It wasn't just, getting the data just for publication purposes or like communication purposes. We are actually using the data. And so they were constantly asking for quick, crazy turnaround on like times and results. Andy's smiling because he was the one who had to produce results very fast all the time. So it was definitely not easy, but I think it was really instrumental, this strong connection with the ministry teams. And then the evaluations was not like something we added on top. It was really in the DNA of this reform.
Yeah, just adding to this, right? So
Andy, over to you too. Yes.
Yes, and thanks for having me, and it's so nice to be with everybody here together and take a pause actually in this very hectic, continues to be very hectic project, but it's been a few years now. And echoing Iman, this did not start as here's a study and here's something where you could have a project, right? I remember the first time going to Morocco, it was for training. It was to be at a training event together with the ministry and build capacity and train on M&E. And similar to Iman's role, it grew out of this, right? So and for me, the first and foremost motivation here is this collaboration and this partnership, right? To see a government that is truly committed to opening itself up at its highest level, and for a reform that is national and nationwide now. So at that level of stakes, collaborate with researchers, take in evidence, but at the same time create the evidence. For me, it was amazing, continues to be amazing, right? But finding a partner, from my perspective, also who's open to engaging with the reality of research as well, was extremely important for the results to be credible. That was extremely important for me as a researcher. For example, that all of our analyses would be pre-registered. And you can go to, let's say, the Open Science Framework website for both primary school and for the middle school study. You can find our pre-analysis plans, and we tied our hands, in a sense, together with the ministry, had all of these discussions beforehand before we ran the first analyses. So I think, finding this balance between having a partner who needs to move fast, but then at the same time safeguarding all the academic requirements as well, to making sure that we're producing evidence that's rigorous and that can be trusted, and then can also be used elsewhere, was amazing, continues to be amazing, and I think was, for me, the first and foremost collaboration was here key to engage in that. You asked about what makes this exciting from an academic perspective. I think there's two, and they both speak to scaling. One of them may be scaling not in the way we usually think about scaling. So first and foremost, scaling is in a sense that we have now good knowledge, thanks to some of the people here in the audience as well. I see GUP people here, giving us good recommendation about what seems to work. We have great buy recommendation or best buy recommendations, right? Such as teaching at the right level, such as structured pedagogy. But we really don't know how to make these work at scale. Even if you look at evidence from, let's say, teaching at the right level, it has failed actually repeatedly when it had been implemented by teachers in schools during their usual school days, right? So we know the technology works. We know this works in summer camps, it works with volunteers, for example, in schools, but we really don't know how to make this work when teachers are being asked to do this, right? So for me, this is a very exciting question, and I'm working in here, I find this, and in the end of March, in just a month, I'm going to be releasing findings from Zambia as well, where I've been working with teaching at the right level for that past 5 years on the same question, right? Like, how can we bring evidence that seems to be working at small scales, but there's high control from NGOs, and actually make this work at scale and embed it in a government system, right? And that's what Iman spoke, like, you know, that took lots of adaptation. I'm very excited about the model that the Moroccan system has found. And coming to the results that Iman mentioned, it's really amazing to see like how the combination of these multiple components of these best buy recommendations in the primary school sector have led to some of the like 1% impacts that we've seen ever, even compared to some of these, you know, NGO or highly controlled implementation models, right? So I think that scaling component for me is super exciting. Seeing a government that seems to have cracked that nut is extremely exciting. The other part on scaling that I think we don't usually think about scaling is to go beyond foundational skills, right? And this is to Khalid's point about, you know, we have to, which I think is important, is laser focus on foundational skills right now, which I agree is really important, but we really don't know what it does both beyond foundational skills, and we don't know what it does in the long term. I think those are two really exciting questions. We now see evidence that it's also possible to move some of this evidence into this critical phase of early adolescence, right? And we also see impacts on skills that go beyond, let's say, foundational numeracy, foundational literacy, right? Especially in the middle school findings that are going to be presenting a little bit in just a few minutes, right? We have these outcomes like dropout, but we also have social emotional skills, right? And we can see that the program actually highly impacted not just learning, but also foundational skills and reduced dropout. And on the learning side as well, it went beyond foundational skills. It went a much broader measure of skills, right? So I think that's a really, really like unexplored area, but like going beyond these foundational skills is an area that I call scaling in that sense. And I'm super excited about that, and I'm very, very happy that we now have evidence on that.
Thanks, Andy. I wanted to actually pick up an audience question quickly as a part of this, because, you know, getting that balance right between what you were saying, like credibility and rigor, as well as more rapid insights, is hard. And I think one of the questions that we've got from the audience is just the how of that. And maybe like Ghali, man, feel free to contribute to this answer as well, because for me, it's both about like the data that comes in, but also the ability to get the insights which are actionable. That's hard with this, right? And while also waiting for, of course, like the bigger picture questions around the evaluation fidelity itself. So I'm curious to know if there is any more insights on how that balance happened and how some of those rapid decision making was done.
Sure, I can go ahead. I mean, it depends on how rapid you're thinking. What is for sure is that the you know, the DNA of the program, both in primary and middle school, is on very rapid iteration and very strong connection to the field, with both quantitative and qualitative data coming in real time to the central team in charge. And that in itself, like, I'm not talking about the results. The results of the evaluation came in at the end of the year, and we can talk later about how we're using that to get better. But that DNA of getting the information and knowing if things are being implemented in the right way, and also getting real-time feedback on what is being implemented, I think that was you know, from the get-go in the DNA of the program, its design and its implementation. And as we're thinking about scaling, this is part of the challenges, or the things that we need to crack, of how do we maintain a very strong link and connection to the field in both ways. And so in the first year, it was quite easy, and I think Iman can also comment on this. You have a core, a core team in the ground who who you're in contact with very regularly, and so you are able to get that that feedback. If I take the example of the middle school program, we were able to get that feedback by going to classrooms, by asking teachers, by asking inspectors, and constantly, improving. In addition to us asking those questions and going on the field or connecting to, the local networks of the ministry in those schools, we've also partnered with other organizations that were able to double check the accuracy of results, for example, for the remediation period. Double check the quality of implementation, for example, for extracurricular activities. So we partnered with NGOs who designed the program and trained our teachers. We asked them to go back and check in the field and whether or not these workshops were happening, etc. So I think that is part of how we're able to make improvements and adjustments within the year as we're implementing. It makes it very challenging, but it also builds trust with teachers, headmasters on the field. They feel heard. They know that we hear the issues that they're facing or their suggestions, but we go beyond that and adjust that as fast as we can. So that's one, kind of regardless of the impact evaluation. And then with the impact evaluation, I think we have very interesting data on where is impact highest in terms of which topic, and within each topic which school year, and also which type of competencies or skills we were able to achieve the highest impact on. For example, in Arabic, we know that the impact was limited for writing, written production, but it was higher perhaps for reading, etc. So those kind of learnings we use from one year to another. And part of the work that we're also trying to do with Andy and the team at MEL is kind of using the monitoring data that we have, that we are collecting ourselves, try to identify what are the factors that could, I wouldn't say explain, but at least could put us in the right direction of what are the levers that we need to focus on to improve either outcomes for learnings or outcomes for dropouts.
Great. Yeah, thank you for those.
Maybe just
yeah, go ahead.
Just
Iman.
one very quick, small addition to what Ghali said. Is what's particular about this reform, and I've worked on other reforms before, but here we are actually connected from the very top to the field. So like I'm at the cabinet level, but I talk with teachers, I talk with inspectors every day. I have a WhatsApp group with 360 teachers that I collected from different regions in Morocco that we talk to every day. Every day they send us feedback. What the scripted lesson of today was not successful. This activity is great. There are some errors here and there. So like this is feedback at like the highest level, I think, because it's like every day we get feedback, and pedagogical teams are in these WhatsApp groups, and they can adapt the way things are done as we go. So even the scripted lessons from the beginning of the year until now, they have evolved and improved And this is thanks to the feedback from teachers. So I just wanted to make that point because I haven't seen it in many places, this very, very strong connection between the decision makers and the people who are working on design and the actual people in the field.
Thanks, man. That's really interesting, and I think that just adds so much more to like insights if you are having that kind of feedback loop as well, right? You're quite aware on how the teachers are also responding and vice versa. So yeah, thanks for that. I think talking of impact evaluation, I'll move again to you, Andy. There's a few other questions coming around this also. One thing, I understand that when the project started in year one, the focus was primary schools, and an evaluation was set up. But there is a very now ambitious evaluation agenda with the middle school work as well, both the continuation of PSP evaluation as well as potentially looking at some of the components that Gali described as part of your impact evaluation work as well. So, Andy, over to you to really talk us through a little bit on how you're thinking, what the ambition is around the evaluation questions and learning, and insights on results as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm excited to give a little bit of a teaser. So we'll be releasing the findings from the first year of the middle school study at the National Teacher Forum in Morocco, where just also, again, giving testament to just how important this is for the ministry. The ministry is bringing together 3,500 teachers to a national event in Morocco, to the capital. And we'll share this again with the teachers, just like you mentioned, right? So the information goes up from the teachers to cabinet level and Iman, but now these evaluation findings that I'm giving you a few of now as a teaser also come back to the teachers. So I think it's really nice and it's often forgotten, right, that these findings also need to come back, and I'm very excited to be in Morocco and share it much more broadly, and not just in these important circles, but again back with teachers who want to know what the results are. But just on a more technical side, so how these evaluations are both set up, both in the primary and now here in this case with the middle school, is that the ministry allowed us to use prior information from the entire school system to match schools to the pioneer schools, right? So in this particular case with the middle schools, we have 200 pioneer schools, and then we had access to all prior, for example, test scores or exam scores in the country for multiple years to match schools to it, right? So what we really have is a comparable set of schools that are matched to it, matched not just on the levels of, let's say, learning levels, but also in the entire trajectory of where these schools were at before, right? So and this gives us 300 study schools in the middle school case, with over 500,000 students in them, over 600,000 students in them. But in them then together with like a huge army of over 800 enumerators or surveyors, we collected pre and post data in both of those. So that allows us then to compare the difference between before and after in both of them, and then that's called the difference in difference. Notably, though, here again, all of this is pre-registered. So like all of this is, we're not selecting these schools after the fact, or we're not doing some funky, different diff p hacking. All of this, even including with table shells, we pre-registered, right? So in that, then we focus on learning, social emotional skills, and dropout. So maybe giving you, I'm not sure whether you see some of this on the screen, but maybe just going through this. In terms of dropout, Ali mentioned this was for the minister and the ministry, one of the main outcomes of interest. So in the middle schools, we see a dropout reduction overall across all students by 1.6 percentage points. That's a 30% reduction on dropout. So a 30% reduction in dropout overall across all students, right? So that's already impressive. But the program has a early warning component in it, an early warning system, where the ministry actually flags students for being at high risk of dropout, and then particularly focuses on these students of high risk. And among those students who, as part of that program, are being flagged for being of high risk, we see a 3.6 percentage point reduction in dropout. So And just to give you an idea, in comparison, in this condition where they wouldn't have gotten the program, these students drop out by 15%. Right, 15% of these kids usually drop out. Right, so we see large reductions on this, and not only do we see these reductions at the end of the school year, but we also, for example, look at whether they re-enroll at the beginning of the following school year. We also see reductions on that. So very large and meaningful reductions in dropout, particularly among the group that is at highest risk of dropout. Maybe going to student learning again, so we have here 4 subjects. We have Arabic, French, science, and math. Again, to Khalid's point, we constructed these assessments ourselves, so these are not the usual exams that a teacher administers. So these are both put together by our teams and then administered by outside survey teams. Overall, if you compare this, we see that the learning from over the course of the school year more than tripled in the pioneer schools. Right? So I think that's a good comparison to think about, like, how much learning there would have been in the absence of the program over this time, and we see this more than 3-fold acceleration of learning, which is massive. If you're more, I know there's a lot of technical experts here in this webinar. In terms of standard deviation impact across these 4 subjects, we see more than a half a standard deviation impact on learning. Right? So this is, within the top 80% of comparable large-scale education interventions. If you think that this is middle school, where students don't learn as much and where impacts are much harder to produce compared to, let's say, the early grades, this is really, really astonishing to me. I rarely see impacts that are larger than, let's say, 0.2 standard deviation. Seeing something like a half a standard deviation impact is very large. This was driven by science, where we see a massive impact. Across the other 3 subjects, we still see a very large impact, however. Right? And then maybe closing out with social emotional skills, like to this going beyond basics. We actually saw a large drop in social emotional skills across all schools, right? But that drop was not as large in the pioneer schools, which then allows us to identify this about 20%, 22% of a standard deviation impact on social emotional skills. And this is very broadly measured. So we went from measuring basically anything that you can think about in social emotional skills, but we see it, for example, on both interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. So how are you interacting with your peers and other schoolmates, but also how do you feel about, for example, your ability to do well in school, right? So we also have a very cool measure of creativity, for example, and we measured impacts on that. So really, to this going beyond basic, for me, really, really interesting to see an intervention that not only affects test scores, but reduces dropout, but then also has, in early adolescence, has the very large impacts on social emotional skills. For me, I believe this is actually the first evaluation in a lower income country that that studies a large-scale government intervention that is focused on social emotional skills. And for me, it was really exciting to see impacts on that dimension as well. But again, paper to be released on middle schools on the 25th of March. And if you can make it to the National Teacher Forum in Rapa, be happy to present them there in more detail, but then also maybe meet in person and discuss.
I think I'll move to you, Iman and Gali, to talk a bit about like how some of this evidence has been also received, and any reflections you have on both sort of the plan moving forward of ongoing evaluation, as well as it being received. So Iman, I'll start with you for any of your reflections.
As I said earlier, the results from the first year of experimentation were quite exceptional. So everyone was obviously very happy here, especially the person leading the reform at the time, because he had made a bet with the researchers that he would reach one standard deviation in impact. And they basically laughed at him, but we almost didn't. But more seriously, I think these results were extremely important for the reform, because we were about to move into the scale-up phase, which we knew will bring a lot of implementation challenges. So before going big, we really needed to know, does the model actually work just in theory and in this first experimentation? And does it produce significant impact when implemented well and when there is like a more manageable sample or size of the sample of schools that we had? And the results were showing that the answer was clearly yes. So that validation was really critical for the reform. It gave legitimacy to the reform. There was no longer a debate, or there was less debate about whether this was the right direction. So basically, the conversation was not anymore like, should we do this, but basically, how do we implement this at scale and with the same quality? And so that shift is actually very powerful in a government context, because when everyone is aligned, everyone agrees that this is what we should be doing, then the energy goes into execution and not into, eternal debates about whether this is the right thing to do or not. So in terms also of what it changed more like concretely in terms of the program, this study looked more at the overall impact at a high level. So we didn't have treatment arms that would tell us which components impacted more than others, etc. We didn't have that kind of detail, but we still were able to get some useful information beyond the validation of the model in terms of refining the pedagogical content, because we were able to identify specific competencies where the impact was smaller, and we were able to ask why and adjust that content. So it really helped us improve the model, not just validate it. And then I think also the success of this evaluation really created trust in evidence within the system. So later on, it made it easier to push for more focused evaluations on some specific components to better understand what really drives the impact. It was easier to push for building the data systems that will support these kind of M&E efforts, etc. So in many ways, it's actually like those results were really instrumental in strengthening the culture of learning within the reform.
Thanks, Iman. And I think that's a good segue, because this is something that I was thinking a little bit about, and I'd love to hear from you, Gali, which is the culture of using data and evidence. So part of this seems to have been a precondition, right? You said that it was in the DNA of everything that you were doing. But at the same time, by producing evidence and actually almost proving that this can work, this kind of partnership, you're also building more and more of that culture and institutionalizing it. So what's your sense of both reflecting on this inception period and the work so far, as well as moving forward? How do you see this culture really having shifted? And what's your insight on institutionalizing use of evidence and data for decisions?
Sure. I think within the ministry, we can say that this shift has happened. A lot needs to be done still, but having focused, maybe let me take just a step back. One of the major shifts of this reform is first to start talking about learning. And it was about time, because for a long time, the Ministry of Education and the priority was about access, which made sense because we had to achieve universal access, which was not the case. Perhaps, I don't want to say something stupid, but perhaps 15 years ago, we still did not have universal access. And given that we're still in a demographic transition, we're still building schools. So a lot of the talk within the ministry was about infrastructure, finances, etc. I think this reform has come at an inflection point where we've reached a critical mass of students, and we needed to now talk more about results. So what this reform has done, and the fact that there was an impact evaluation and that data was at the core of this program, is that little by little, the language that stakeholders within the ecosystem of education, so not only the ministry, but also the executive arms of the ministry at regional, provincial level, and even schools, is now shifting towards talking about results and learning outcomes. And it cannot happen overnight. It requires a lot of, hand-holding and structuring and finding the right level of, of detail. You can't expect a headmaster to talk about standard deviations. And at the same time, you don't want them to only be talking about the grade at the end of the year. So part of the shift that this impact evaluation and this program has delivered is that people are starting to talk more about, are students able to learn, to do basic math, etc., etc. So that's one major shift, and that's across all levels of the education ecosystem. Now, more broadly, and even if we look outside of the education ecosystem, I think what this has done to public policy making in Morocco in general, might be extrapolating and overemphasizing the impact of what we're doing. But the way I see it is that it's shaping discourse. As we talk about the results, and as the results are positive, and as others start talking about the results, sometimes some might question the results, but they're still talking about the results. Others are happy about the results, and they talk about the results. And so there's discourse shaping that's happening outside of the ministry that is very positive. Also, I think the fact that this is this is a massive impact evaluation. We have in front of us, of course, Andy, but there's a large research team, and then a large ecosystem of research associates here at the MEL. And so having contributed to that pipeline of projects is a contribution to building the ecosystem of monitoring and evaluation in Morocco. So that's also, a contribution to building a broader ecosystem. And we see things happening. I think in last May or June, Andy was at UM6P at a conference organized by the Morocco Evaluation Lab, sharing about what evaluation is, and bringing stakeholders from different ministries and public agencies. So that transition is happening, and it is strengthened by actors who believe in it. And I think what we're doing also in this webinar is, and I'm seeing some participants that are based in Morocco. I think that building also this community of development practitioners in Morocco who are, interested in impact evaluation, and is part of that transition. That we're all hoping for, not only for education, but also many other public policy priorities in Morocco.
Thanks, Ali. I think that's really interesting to hear how it has sort of influenced the larger ecosystem as well. I did want to kind of ask another question. So far we've seen very promising results, and high fidelity, and really interesting middle school results as well. As more and more evaluations happen on different components, you might see some no impact or different type of results, right? So how prepared do you think the government is to also scale back on things and make decisions that it's a much tougher decision to make sometimes, to roll something back or tweak some component, etc. Just curious to know if that's something that has been discussed, and what then the response may look like from the government?
I can take this one because we did not just have positive and great, amazing results coming in from the research teams. We also had some tough to take results over time that I'm not going into details in that because they're not published yet. But honestly, after the initial, disappointment and all that, there were actually some of the best news that we could have received because they forced everyone to take the next stages of the reform even more seriously. Because when you get very strong positive results in the beginning, it builds confidence, and you think you're on the right track, and everyone can start being a little comfortable and think that what happened in the first experimentation phase is what's going to happen in the next scale-up phases, which is actually like so far from the truth. When you get like weaker results, and granted, the first year we got such strong results that now anything that is still really great looks really disappointing to us. So and that's a real challenge, now when we talk about 0.2 or 0.3 standard deviation, 0.4, that's like that's nothing, for people. They expect 0.9 standard deviation for everything. But more seriously, when you get weaker results, I think it creates urgency, and it pushed the leadership and the teams to mobilize more resources, and to really address the gaps. First of all, understand where the gaps are and address them head on. And instead of questioning the value of evaluation, it actually strengthened the commitment to it. And that's when the partnership is mature, because for me, the real sign of success is not just that we're all celebrating when we have great impact, but it's when negative results come. They do not lead to denial and to say no, that evaluation it doesn't matter or whatever, but it actually really leads to course correction, and it leads to really deep thinking about what can be improved. And so I think that we're there, and that's really good news for our partnership.
Great. I think that was a very honest reflection. And practically what you were saying, that sometimes these mixed results are also good in terms of reality checks, right? Because it kind of tells you really what some of the weak points are. So I think that's kind of really interesting to hear. That's been the perspective. A final question for all three of you, because I'd like to hear from all three on the sustainability of a model like this. So as you mentioned before, there is a really large infrastructure built to do these data collection internally within the ministry, as well as externally in partnership with researchers. There is a large sort of JPAL team, as well as the Moroccan evaluation lab as well. What does sort of the next 5 to 10 years really look like in terms of sustainability? Does it, how does this model actually grow? Does it need to exist, or does it need to sort of die after a point, or does it need to be embedded? How do you see this model sustaining itself? So I'll start with you, Andy, perhaps giving us a bit of a researcher perspective on the embedded lab model and how it looks like for a context like Morocco with the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has already happened, and I see it continuing to happening by, again, this being a collaboration that is a multi-year collaboration. And actually, to this question, I saw something in the audience about political change, right? Political change has already happened in the past, and I think the collaboration is so strong and the partnership is so strong here that I see this going forward on the research partnership. I think we could institutionalize this more. I'm usually not privy to a lot of this, but I think I'd be very eager to play a larger role in this, and we could think about this potentially institutionalizing even further. But on that perspective, I'm just really excited about what we've built already, and moving from primary schools to middle schools, and now super exciting questions coming from the ministry that go way beyond these reforms, right? Whether this is on pre-primary, whether this is on the role of educational technology, I think what is the role of AI, and how this. So these are all super important questions for the ministry, and having a partner or being a partner for them, and having Mel and UN6P and JPAL and the ministry being in this close collaboration, I can only see it growing and becoming stronger going forward. So I'm not super concerned about this. I'm actually really excited about this becoming even stronger. I let Ali and Iman speak more about like the future of the program and what might happen and what the future should look like.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Iman.
No, I was gonna say that I'm as excited as Andy to see where this leads us, and we are asking a lot of new questions as we go. However, I am a little more worried about how we embed this within the ministry, because right now it's largely driven by people like Rally or myself, or some people at the ministry level that have been collaborating with us throughout this journey. But if we wanted to have an actual M&E system that can run experiments without the help of a partner, for when it's, because sometimes we ask questions that need a quick response, and that we don't have the time to build a whole partnership or evaluation projects and find financing, etc. to do. So these are part of the day-to-day things that we need, and institutionalizing that within the ministry is actually not an easy thing. Since the beginning, most of the work we've done, we've always involved ministry staff, even for the evaluation on the field, to collect the data, because we wanted the system itself to learn how to measure and how to do these things, but because the implementation and the implementation quality is our main focus this past 3 years, building a whole M&E team wasn't necessarily what we spend most of our efforts on. We are now in the 3rd year. We're starting a more deliberate effort to strengthen ministry teams, but I am on this. I would say that we still haven't figured out a model where we can have our own internal capacity that helps decision makers on an everyday basis when they are asking a question, and that also help partners do the evaluations, because it actually takes so much effort to do these things in the education system. The schools are scattered everywhere. There are so many different stakeholders, etc. So it takes a lot of effort on our part. And if we wanted partners or researchers like Andy to do more research, we need to have teams in front of them to respond to that. So like when I speak with Andy, he has great ideas for A/B testing ideas or evaluation ideas, etc. But then I'm asked the question, who's gonna run this on the field and make sure that there is implementation fidelity, that there is things are done the right way, that the data collection is done in the right way. That takes so much time. And so today I feel a little bit limited in all what I want to do on the evaluation side of things with this capacity. So I know there are models, like for example with the FID, there are big grants that can help ministries improve their M&E systems. I hope there's more of that, because I think that's really key to transforming the internal teams to be able to work more on these kind of projects.
Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said. I think on the bright side, what what we saw from the impact evaluation studies over the past 2 years is that there is, there is capacity at some, levels of the impact evaluation value chain. So when it comes to data collection, we have trained and strong surveyors who are part of the ministry staff who do this, with rigor, and they assure high levels of quality for administering the results, etc. So that's one. And I'm looking at the value chain backwards, so just it's the end of a short fasting day, so please bear with me. And so data collection, we have the capacity on the field, and we have rigorous and trained people to do it. On instrument development, we've now, I think, built a community of inspectors for each discipline or topic who, understand and speak similar language to Andy and Alejandra when we have to build those, evaluation instruments. We know when we wanted to align with international standards and PISA and teams, etc. We know what needed. We knew what needed to be done, and same for other topics. So on that instrument development and collaboration with researchers through guidelines, we also have that expertise. What's also very positive, and I think if you bring back Morocco to a low or a middle income context, we have a very strong, a strong data system. We have information about our students going across several years, and that was what helped Andy and team to identify the schools and then select the students for the sample, etc. So we have, coverage for some parts of the value chain, but and I agree with Iman, what we lack is kind of the métier, like the craft, the M&E craft within the ministry. So currently within the architecture, the org of the ministry, there's an evaluation center, but it's more like the structure that builds the end of primary and secondary exams. So it's not a program evaluation. So we do need that. What form it will or can take is, a question that I hope we'll manage to answer. For now, it's being done externally, as Iman said, by consultants or us. But I have hope that some of the leaders within the ministry whose services now are in charge of the pioneer school programs, both in primary and secondary, will at least have dedicated folks to work on this. And that's when we will need the MEL and the JPAL network to also invest time and capacity with these people through trainings, exchanges, etc., so that they, the ask for training to come from them and not the other way around, and they will be asking for projects. So I think it's a long way. We're still there's a long way between us and this state, but I'm hoping that with our collective efforts we'll manage to get there.
Great, thanks. Thank you for providing the additional context. I think that's quite useful. What I will do is, I know we're coming to the close of this discussion, is take one final question from the audience, because we have a few people who've ask this question more about the political economy context. And because, to really make things successful and implementation, there is sort of a piece of, what the structure looks like from a political economy perspective. I wanted to maybe hear from you what some of the reflections were. I think, Iman, you had mentioned something about leadership, and other aspects that was sort of quite critical as well. Any sort of final, very quick insights on that to respond to some of the questions from the audience?
Maybe on the political leadership, yeah, that's very important. For example, when you introduce something like a remediation program in the beginning of the year, no one has ever heard of that. No one understands that the kids need to be grouped by learning level and things like this. And so you have parents come in every day in front of the school and asking, why are our kids learning stuff from last year, whereas other kids in other schools are learning new things. And so there was so much pressure in the beginning because we were coming with a bunch of new things, scripted lessons, for example. There's all kinds of talk that happened about whether we're automating the teacher's work and whether the teacher is now just someone executing a scenario that is already planned. So all of these things, definitely political leadership, because it gives us protection as a team to continue something we've started even when there is big pressure. But also the engagement, the continuous engagement with stakeholders. And that was in the first year, I remember video conferences maybe every day up to midnight with inspectors, mostly with inspectors in the beginning, but also with other stakeholders, trying to explain why we are doing things, So they don't get something just from the top and you say, this is the new model, this is how we're going to do things. But everything that is being done was explained to them and was then, spread into the system. And so this really strong link, again, between the people who are designing and the people who are in the field was really instrumental in, sometimes preventing some big crises. And that is even now much more difficult to do at scale. In the beginning, we had a manageable size of team of inspectors. Now we have a huge team of inspectors and of teachers. And Ghali talked about it. Now the key is also institutionalizing all this mindset and all this methodology that we work with at the central level, at the regional, provincial, and local level, so school level. And so that means much more, to me, less exciting work, but really important work, which is each person needs to understand their role. Each person needs to have a toolkit to be able to do the job correctly. So a lot of producing so many guides, doing so many trainings, so much, so many video conferences to explain everything to people, because the reform is everywhere in Morocco. So it has to meet, people from very different background have to understand and have to engage with this reform.
Great, thank you so much. And I think these are some of the nitty-gritty nuances, and as you said, not the most exciting part of this is really in many ways sort of the make or break also, of making sure all the conditions are right for this. Thank you so much for this very, very interesting conversation. I think we've been talking for a while to set this up, and we've been tracking Morocco's work for such a long time as well. So I'm glad that we had this opportunity and we had an audience of 50 plus people to hear you as well. Thank you so much. I'll hand over to John for some closing remarks as well. But I think this has been such a useful and interesting conversation to really sort of also push the idea of what institutionalizing some of this at scale really looks like, in all its different moving parts as well. So over to you, John.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Rachna. Thank you, Ghali. Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Andy. That was a really terrific session. I'm aware of this case study, but I learn from it every time I hear it presented. And Larry Cooley just remarked in the chat, who's one of the co-founders of the Scaling Community of Practice, is the situation described in Morocco shouldn't be exceptional, but it is. And I just want to start by saying like how exceptional I think it is. I mean, as Andy mentioned, that the results that you see from the pioneer schools and primary education in impact evaluation is at the 99th percentile of treatment effects. So what that means is like, imagine that there's an NGO implementing a program in 150 schools and there's an RCT of that program. This is in the 99th percentile of all types of programs, including not restricted to ones that are led by government and are being scaled in over 4,000 schools. So just the magnitude of change is truly remarkable. Second, the fact that this is not a pilot. So even 600 schools in the primary version of the program, school version of the program, is still pretty big. But the fact that it's in 70% of the country and 4,600 schools, so something is effective, and something effective has scaled, and that is it is exceptional, and I think it's a huge celebration for Ghali, Iman, Andy, and the many people who are involved in the leadership of the Moroccan government. So, like I think three themes I wanted to highlight that I heard about why this change proved to be so transformational. And one was this issue, I think, of like really, as Iman set it up, like, when you had something like only 20% of the kids in Morocco had mastered foundational schools before the program, foundational skills before the program, it led to this huge political focus from the highest levels of government and a huge amount of political courage that we're going to do something now. And you heard a lot of that. This was very much set from the very beginning to be a transformational program, not a piecemeal incremental program. This was not about isomorphic mimicry, where there's a grand pronouncement on a stage about some new education reform, and there's not all of this follow-up from the very top to the bottom that we heard from Ghali and Iman today about how much dedication and follow-up there was. So I think that is a huge factor. This is the M&E working group, and I do think like this is a remarkable example of how much evidence, evaluation, monitoring, learning was completely integrated into this. And so, I mean, as Andy said, some of the JPAL's initial engagements and Andy's initial engagements as a researcher with this was around a training with the Moroccan government on monitoring and evaluation. Right when, the way that they knew that only 20% of the kids were mastering foundational skills is that the ministry did its own simple assessments to get a sense of what was happening. And then there's some of you might be aware of the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel, which is kind of classifying different education interventions into being like great buys or promising buys. And so there's been a lot of push, I think that to try to work with governments around the world to learn from the evidence that's out there globally, and to take that learning, contextualize it, and build off of strength of a body of evidence of things that have been effective in other contexts. So the fact that, like Iman said, that was a non-negotiable pillar for this reform, that it was going to look at the kind of the world's best evidence of to improve learning outcomes and build on top of that. To Ghali's point, it's not like plug and play and copy and paste. This is something that requires a ton of adaptation. They didn't do this adaptation alone. So they brought in Pratham International to be part of helping to think about, how to organize the remedial education programs. And so that, I think, is also just the focus on to build on a global base of evidence is remarkable. A related piece of that, which really came across, was these strong feedback loops, the adaptive learning components. Really easy to say that you're doing that, and really hard to do that in real time. With all of the back checks, and I found what Iman was saying very convincing about how the top leadership was connected to things that are happening in the field through WhatsApp groups, and that kind of spirit of adaptive evaluation was really, I think, part of, you can choose things that are evidence-based, but actually how do you implement them? And then how do you, through the practice of implementation with feedback loops, do it better? And then out of all of this, they also decided to collaborate with Andy and some of the premier education researchers in the world to integrate formal impact evaluations and have to deal with Andy's demanding pre-analysis plans and teams of 800 surveyors. So, across all of these dimensions, it's remarkable how much evidence and evaluation were truly part of the DNA of this program. And then my last point on this is I just think the coalition of actors working together. So we have Iman as a senior advisor, Gali as part of the government, Andy as a researcher. You heard a little bit about Proctum. You heard about some of the funding came from the World Bank. UM6P is a private university. JPAL, this Harvard Center for International Development. I mean, I think these models of these kind of lab-based approaches really benefit when there's a coalition of actors that bring different strengths, but they really have to be kind of anchored to the government's priorities and have people in the government that can kind of leverage this diverse coalition. So that's, I think, an also special part of this. So huge thank you to Rachna and Aparna for organizing, to Gabby, who behind the scenes brought us all together in this virtual room, to the speakers, Iman, Gali, and Andy. I hope many of you who have joined will join other Scaling Community of Practice as part of our annual meetings. And this is very much a part of a mainstreaming campaign that the Community of Practice is doing, a 5-year campaign to put effective strategies for achieving sustainable outcomes at the center of international development, with a focus on the global South. And so I think you got a spirit of that today. You're going to see a lot more programming and special initiatives in this direction. And with that, thank you to the audience for joining and asking challenging questions and engaging throughout. And I'll, with that, formally end the session. So thank you all very much.